And then I have a time like I had this morning, and I think, why am I not making time to do that every day? Why am I? We get caught up in the things in this world. 11 years ago, September 11th, 2001, people were just like we are today. We're going along, doing our own thing. And when people were going to work that morning, they had no idea what the day had in store for them. As I was trying to put some things together for this service, I did some searching on the internet, testimonies, and how some things changed that day. And there was a testimony of one stockbroker, and for some reason he was running late that day, and he was on his way to work when the first plane hit, and he made a call to his the stockbrokerage firm that he worked at to see what was going on. And the lady that answered said that there was a gentleman, and the people that were giving this talk, she was the daughter of one of the gentlemen that worked there at that stockbrokerage firm, and they called him the Rev, and he was kind of the known Christian in the office, and that was kind of their nickname for him. But when he called and got a hold of the secretary, she says, Rev's got about 50 of us in a prayer circle, and we're praying. And as they went on to give their testimony about her father, and she knew, what her father had done, they talked about that story was spread far and wide, and still is making an impact in people's lives, and people are coming to the Lord hearing that story. And as we go through our daily life, it's so easy to get caught up in things that are going on around us, things that we see, feel. But some of the things that, when we look back on 9/11 and what happened that day, as I said earlier, it's not really things that we didn't know, but I just want to remind you of a few of the things that we tend to forget, and that day really brings out. It tends to, when tragedy comes in, it tends to highlight, things, and as I said earlier, sometimes some of the sermons that Sue preaches, it's like, man, I knew that at one time, but somewhere along the way, I kind of got away from it, or I kind of forgot about it, and we get reminded of it. And it helps us put it back in practice. But one of the things is how vulnerable we really are. Those twin towers, they were kind of monuments to the power, the financial industry, the power, and when we see how quickly something like that can happen, that someone can come into our country and take over our planes and crash them into our buildings, and you have thousands that die. Nobody ever thought anything like that could happen in America. And as you see us going, the road we're on, it's really scary in one sense. I'd really be scared if I didn't know Christ. But when you see how quickly like that something can happen, there was a book. Jim Collins is a writer, and he wrote a book on. It said How the Mighty Falls, and this is a book about large companies that that fell to financial ruin, you know, that basically once were at the top and exist no more. And one thing of the downward spiral, the first thing that he says was the hubris born of success. And basically all that is the pride. Pride, and we, in America, you know, we have that pride thing, and we trust in our military power and our finances and all the things that we're blessed with in this country. But of course we know, you know, the Bible says pride comes before a fall. And in Isaiah 31, we'll read to you, it says, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help, who rely on horses, who trust in the multitude of their chariots and the great strength of their horsemen, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or seek help from the Lord. Yet he too is wise and can bring disaster. He does not take back words. He will rise up against the horse and the wicked, and against those who help the evildoers. But the Egyptians are men and not God. Their horses are flesh and not spirit. When the Lord stretches out his hand, he who helps will stumble. He who is helped will fall. Both will perish together." You know, we're so vulnerable, and not only in this country as people, but in day-to-day life. You know, as far as my occupation, I see people that are going along in life every day thinking everything's normal when tragedy strikes. You know, when you were coming to work this morning, you know, you were passing vehicles going anywhere from 20 to 60 miles an hour, depending on which way you came. Yet every day, I see people who are going down the street and they have seizures, and that car that's coming at you at 60 miles an hour, you don't know when that car is going to hit you head on. You know what? We're so vulnerable. You know, you hear about the diseases, and you know, I could go on and on about the things that we're susceptible to, but until it hits us, hits home, it's like we hear it, but it goes in one ear and out the other. I'm guilty of it too. I'm guilty of it too. But when we have wake-up calls in our life or in our country like that, what do we do with them? What do we do with them? You know, how do we, you know, September 10th, 2001, the United States was a completely different country than it was September 12th, 2001. You know, and we've all seen and heard the testimonies of people that they thought the world was coming to an end. And, you know, those things, school shootings. I remember the first Columbine. You know, it was all over the news. And we just couldn't believe something like this was happening in the United States. And I hate to admit, but now you hear about them and they're terrible, and you think they're terrible, but the shock factor is not there anymore. The shock factors, and I really think even as Christians we're becoming so desensitized to the things in this world that it's easy to get lax, it's easy to get lazy spiritually, you know, and it's a wake-up call. And you know, Gene and I were talking this morning, and he was talking about how the Lord is really moving in his family, even in the little children. And people, you know, I just think we're getting close. You know, I mean, none of us know the day or the hour that the Lord's going to come back. But boy, you see all the signs. You see all the signs. And I'm the first one up here this morning to say, you know, I keep praying, Lord, forgive me for my slack, stir the fire up in me again. You know, revival, stir me up, because you see these things, and then you go along and you get caught up in your day-to-day life, and everybody's busy, and it's so easy to do. And life is fragile. We forget how fragile life is. And as we go along, and you think about, you know, what happened that day and the lives have changed. And I've got this bracelet on it says, I am second. This one over here says, I'm radical, or not radical, but it says radical. It has a verse on it. But I remember shortly after all that happened, the fire department, and I think it was the unions, you know, they came out, they had bracelets, and they had some pendants that said, we will never forget. And, you know, those things are out there so we don't forget. And I wear these because sometimes I'll be going on in my day-to-day life, and, you know, and in that it's all about me zone, you know, just doing my own thing. And I look down and I think, wait a minute, I am second. Well, of course, I told my wife, I said, really, I need one that says like I am 6 or 7. Because by the time, you know, you have God and wife and kids, and, but it reminds you. It reminds you. And actually, that's one of the reasons, you know, I wear those to help remind me. Help remind me. It's not all about me. And people were the natural man is selfish. It's all about us. But to be Christ-like, you know, He gave His all for us. Just a reminder. Just a reminder. You know, in the Old Testament, they had them build altars and things to remember the great victory that God had given them. And you know, if we don't stir ourselves up and we don't have things to remember, you know, we get in the Word, and you know, I get slack about that. I get slack about getting in the Word, and then you get in the Word and you think, oh my gosh, why haven't I been in this, you know, more than I have? Because there's so much good things, but you get sidetracked. Am I the only one, or does that happen to anybody else? You know, and it does make us bad people. It's just, we need a constant reminder. You know, being with brothers and sisters in the Lord, we need a reminder. You know, God is sovereign, we are not. God is in control. He's sitting on His throne. When we trust in Him, when we walk with Him, man, talk about, you know, there's a lot of stress in this life. But when you're a Christian and you're truly relying on Him, and it's like, well, God, you know, if you don't change this situation, if you don't come through, then I'm sunk. But it's all about you, you know, because I've done all I can do. I put it in your hands. And for me, you know, I've been in situations it's like, well, it is what it is, God, you know. He always comes through. Maybe not like I'm looking for Him to come through or doing what I think. Was that right?
That's my saying. It is what it is.
So, but it's in His hands. And when we trust in Him, He's going to work it out. He will work it out. His Word says He'll work it out. And you know what? And the thing that He's really been trying to get into me lately and is that, you know what? He loves us regardless. Because I have days where if I feel like I've done pretty good that day, you know, maybe done this for the Lord or reached out or something, I'm feeling like, hey, He loves me a little extra today because I was good. And then there's those days I'm like, oh, I know I'm definitely not His favorite today because, you know, I'm feeling pretty bad about myself. But you know what? We really need to understand that there's nothing we can do. Our best day cannot make Him love us not anymore. Our worst day cannot make us love Him any less. And if you leave here today and that's the only thing you get out of it, if you get that out of it, because you know, it's kind of like you see the movies where you have this little red guy sitting on one side and this little white guy sitting on the other side, and he's whispering things in this ear and he's whispering things. I tell you what, that's exhausting sometimes. And unfortunately, sometimes we hear some things and we don't realize it's the devil trying to speak those things into us. And we beat ourselves up and we feel bad about ourselves. And that's exactly what he wants. Because you know what? When you're feeling that way about yourself, you're not really a great witness to anybody else. Because for one thing, you don't feel worthy to even, you know, speak to somebody else to do something.